BSides DC 2016 videos are brought to you by clearedjobs.net and cybersecjobs.com, tools for your next career move, and Antietam Technologies, focusing on advanced cyber detection, analysis, and mitigation.
Thank you very much for that introduction. As mentioned, my name is Randall, and this is me and my family. So this is my lovely wife, Katie. I think I've met everybody here at least once, if not more than once, at bro workshops or other places. And I'll let these two guys introduce themselves. So name and age, please.
Eamon.
How old are you?
7.
Kieran?
Kieran. 5.
And this one down here is Siobhan. Siobhan, how old are you? Can you yell real loud?
3.
She's 3. Right. I'm a lot of things. I think most of you know me as a network security monitoring guy, or perhaps the bro training guy, the critical stack guy. I used to be a bunch of other startup guys. And I've got a lot of things that I've been very lucky to find in my life. And I've had a really a unique journey that kind of took me from point A to point B. So I wanted to first start it and talk about what's the goal of the keynote. It's kind of a huge honor to get asked to give a keynote, especially for a kids CryptCon, right? A kids CryptCon, when we're talking about security, I wanted to sort of think about, what is our real goal here today? We're gonna learn, we're gonna have a good time, we're gonna spend some time with the community. Maybe we're gonna experiment with some new things, and we're gonna build relationships with not only the people we brought, but perhaps with new people. We're going to have a chance to share what we're passionate about. If you think about all the parents here, we're probably in technology in some way. So that's something that we're really incredibly passionate about. And this is our opportunity to continue to share those passions with our kids, with like-minded adults. It's a really unique community, and one of the main reasons why my wife and I just relocated out to the Northern Virginia area. For a long time, I've commuted globally for bro training and other events, but we're local now. And it was a big push for me was that I wanted to be near a community of people like Nova Hackers and other orgs that were interested in doing these kind of things. So with community in mind, I wanted to start by plugging a few of the open source projects that I'm heavily involved in. The first is obviously still Bro. We did a 6-hour free workshop yesterday for another 60 folks. We've got another 80 slots for tomorrow, most of which are full, but yesterday we did get all of the overflow spots in. So if you're interested in learning a little more about that, I can't make any promises, but we'll do our best to squeeze you guys into the room. So far, I think we've been able to, every year, squeeze people in. I think our count just from free Bro workshops that we've done at BSides DC is over 600 people, free workshops, and globally, I've probably done about 2,500 now. I have everybody in Git, so it's easy for me to pull them on. There's another great open source community that's coming to DC here shortly, ShurikattaCon. It's a high-speed, fast pattern AC matcher. It does a lot more. That's a really unique event to have in the city, so if you're in tech, I would really strongly encourage you to check that out. Siobhan, you coming up here? Okay, come here. And among other things, I'm now involved in both Shurikatta as well as OS Query, which is a host-based agent. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, I helped get the team started up in their new venture up in Boston here. Speaking of community, I wanted to start by sharing some of my own personal story. And I picked my mother to share her story a little bit to start mine, because she grew up in the midst of a civil war in Northern Ireland, not that far away and not that long ago. And she fled in 1969 to marry my dad, who was in the Air Force at the time. He'd been drafted in the tumultuous 60s in the United States. Let's not put that in my mouth, please, honey. And he was lucky enough to be in the Air Force stationed in North Africa. And I remember as a young man going to visit my mom's family, and I said, Mom, how could you ever possibly leave these people? They're amazing. They're wonderful. And her response was simple. She said there was no opportunity. She said, I wanted to have a family, and I wanted you guys to have the ability to pursue your passions. And that wasn't available in Ireland at the time. And so growing up in Kentucky, which is where my parents ended up, I had a really great childhood. Being in Kentucky, there's lots of rural things to do, so a lot of fishing, outdoor camping, and stuff like that. And I was lucky enough to have family members that were very entrepreneurially minded. So my earliest job that I remember was actually working at flea markets. We sold everything. We would sell these little, my first big sale was that rubber band gun right there. It's got a little sprocket in it. So you'd load these big red rubber bands in it and you could like rapid fire them. And I still remember how exhilarated I was as a 6-year-old making a $25 sale. And bantering back and forth with the guy. This was 1983 or so. And we would go on to sell things like cuckoo clocks and T-shirts, blood tests. I was sort of like a little child barker at these events. I'd go out and rope people in and pull them into my booth. And so if you've ever seen me at my bro training, I think it now kind of all starts to make sense, right? You start to see that little bit of carnival, festival nature in my bro training that I do. I went on to run fireworks booths, so we would stock shelves in the summer, and then we'd run these little store-side tents, and we'd do $15,000 in fireworks sales over a 7-day period. So I sort of grew up with this really strong entrepreneurial spirit that really served me very well. I want to say that that's my first true real passion that I discovered, was that I really liked controlling my own destiny. I like to see the ability to work really hard and then to capture those results myself. So I've been evolved into the serial entrepreneur. My weirdest job is definitely number 3. I was an actual clown on a riverboat on the muddy Ohio River. I got paid $100. I taught myself how to juggle and got some little pocket tricks. And I did this birthday parties. So in a 4-hour cruise, I'd get $100 cash, no questions asked. At the time, that was definitely my peak, earnings per hour. Maybe fireworks beat that 10 years after that. I went on, of course, to work in restaurants and lifeguards before I found my second great passion, which was around network security. And I'll share a little story here now that the statute of limitations has passed. So when I went to university in 1995, I went to Xavier University in Cincinnati. It's a great school. It was a great school for me. Very small computer science department. And in high school, I was that traditional nerd. I remember I got a freshman profile. And in my profile, they're like, "What do you like to do?" And I said, "I like to take apart things like hair dryers and understand how they work." I actually said that. And it was true, because that's what I was doing on the weekends. Rebuilding machines, teaching myself about electronics, because I didn't really have that large of a social life to sort of pivot around after that. And in college was that weird time for me when being in technology became very cool. I got hired by the university as a full-time employee, and we didn't have a red team. I'm fortunate enough now, I'll tell you about it later, to be at Capital One, and I see some of our red teams back over here. They're great guys. But we didn't have anything like that at the time. I was doing what you would call DevOps. I was writing utilities in Pascal, Turbo Pascal, believe it or not, that would run in a NetWare logon script to push software. And it was really exciting. And I remember my first vulnerability that I found was the ping of death, right? And not being an inexperienced young man, I didn't really think about the consequences of testing it in my own environment. So I crashed a few workstations, not a big deal, and then took down www.xshoot.edu, and it didn't come back up until it was replaced 2 weeks later. I have no idea what kind of kernel panic I caused to, overwrite the MBR. I don't even know what the heck happened, but it turned into a minor debacle. And I just, was testing. I didn't really think about it. So that was the first time, and until recently, only this 2 years ago, I had my second time when I crashed something on accident when I was testing out another exploit. Or actually, I was testing out a fingerprint, but I can't talk about that one yet. So let me skip ahead a bit. So let me skip ahead 10 years after that, past college, past the first couple startups, to 2005. And I'll mute this, and hopefully the video still plays good. At the time, I'd been dating my wife, or my now wife, for quite some time. And we planned this epic trip to China because I was going to ask her to marry me. And I wanted her to always have the most epic engagement story of all time. So it was at the end of the Great Wall Marathon. We finished right there at the finish line. We made it on CNN. We made it on Sports Center. We made it on all these kind of things. But I was shocked when I was over there. And it was very personal to me to see all of these kids. And I didn't include the youngest kids in the video. I tried to pick kids that looked like they were around 16, 17, 18 that I pulled out. But in our personal videos, everywhere we went in China, every marketplace we went to, were those little kids working in those flea markets. And I commented to my wife about how that was how I grew up, but that wasn't how I wanted my kids to grow up. And it felt kind of hypocritical because I wouldn't change my childhood. I wouldn't change anything I've done. Even the lowest low that I've had ended up turning into one of the best things that ever happened to me. But it was very powerful, and it made me somewhat hesitant and fearful for my own kids, even though this was years before I was even married and had my own kids. And I commented about how all of these kids are growing up with these skill sets that you pick up being a young entrepreneur. That you, when you're out in the marketplace, you sort of learn all these things. And by a show of hands, let me ask, how many of you as parents here would want your kids out doing these jobs right here? You know, you miss the machete, right? Not that many, right? But let me ask, how many of you as parents would want your parents to have that work ethic and pick up those entrepreneurial skills, right? That sort of go-to market, the ability to market themselves, the ability to fail and to pick yourself back up. And that's when I sort of felt like a real hypocrite and had some real personal reflections about what do I do with these guys, right? Because I want my kids to grow up with the ability and the opportunity to have similar sorts of experiences that are outside of the classroom, that are outside of traditional educational systems. Because for me personally, most of the technology stuff I picked on my CS degree was incredible, but I really learned when I was out working. And the entrepreneur skills, you know, I learned all that on the fly. I never got a business degree or anything. And the sort of DNA that I've really adopted here is this that a startup is a search for a repeatable, scalable business model. That's what makes it different than operating a business. And I reflected on that about how life is sort of a search for finding something that you can repeat, that you want to scale, that you want to be passionate about and move forward. So that's looking back, and that's well and good and all. But I thought about taking it a little further and then trying to look ahead. And you've ever seen the videos of the Amazon work centers or the increasing levels of automation in our society? It certainly provides a bit of opportunity. I mean, we're in tech, right? I mean, this is our bread and butter. But at some point, you have to wonder when the scale tips and we start to outpace ourselves. I'm not going to let this one play all the way. I think you guys get the idea. But I did want to show you the next one, which is the new Tesla factory, where this is about the most meta thing I could find right now that's actually current and in vogue. These are robots building self-driving cars. Think about that for a second, right? Robots building self-driving cars. Transportation is still the #1 employer in the United States. And while I'm passionate about technology, and I think I'm trying to, teach my kids that passion is contagious. They see how excited I am about Arduinos and circuits and robotics, and they get excited about those things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to pigeonhole them into what I love. I want them to have the ability to discover their own passions. And I'm certainly not the first person, and we're certainly not the first generation to think about how technology is going to impact us. The Luddites actually were afraid of like the looms and the weaving. And this guy, Conrad Gessner, I tried to find the oldest example that I could find. And he printed a book about information overload on the Gutenberg press. Right? And he was like, there's too many books, there's too much information, the human mind can't deal with all this. And I thought, I looked for quotes, but they were all like, they were too old time. I wanted to find a quote I could read and you would not know if it was modern or not, but that didn't work out. So I'll just sort of explain it. So that's looking back, and that's thinking about forward. Yes, Karen? You'll do your jokes in just a minute. We're almost to the jokes part, all right? So we're all raising our kids with iPads and technology, and there are these digital natives, right? They don't know what it's like to not have that. And what are the consequences of growing up with things like Google AI? Who's installed Alu on their phone? That's Google's new chatbot. Okay, after I'm finished speaking, before you do anything else, install it and instant message a friend with it. It is incredible. It's like having all 100 million of Google's answers and little pivots that you can get in a browser, that you can ask it questions, available to you in chat. So you can do things, I don't know if you can see this very well, you can say, in a chat with other people, conversational, you can say, okay, Google, how much is it to fly to Cancun next weekend? And it will come into channel and interact with you. And it has this intent-driven interface, if you will. It's the best way I can describe it, where it understands what was the intent of the conversation, and it gives you these options here at the bottom of each chat to drive the conversation forward. And it continues to learn and get smarter as it adopts to your working styles. It's a pretty amazing kind of thing, and the new Google Home, which is their version of Echo, just came out. That is also another interface for this. So there's this universal interface for that. I'm tremendously excited about it. And we don't have it yet, but who has an Echo? Anybody? All right. Here's another great product to really sort of understand how your kids are going to interact with technology. And boys, I don't know if you realize this, but every question you ask Echo shows up on Daddy's phone. Did you guys know that? You did not know that. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the things that my kids, how they're interacting with sort of basic AI. Yes, sweetheart. Up, please. Here, you want to tell them? Here, you tell them. Go ahead. You tell them. What were we saying?
You.
Go ahead. All right, he doesn't want to tell. So apparently I did already tell them that. I don't want to do that. That would be embarrassing. Break my laptop and everything. So there were the expected things, right? So can you please to Dino Charge? Do you want to have No Stitch? Play Frozen. Play Uptown Funk You Up. Play Kids Bop 30. Play Scooby-Doo. Play the Jurassic Park theme, which I love that was on the shirts today. I didn't actually know that. To the outright amusing. What is love? We want I'm Your Mother. Do you Star Wars? Another joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? What is Pikachu's biggest weakness? Do another knock-knock joke. Tell another joke. Use the Force. What is your quest? Play the funniest joke in the world. Play a joke. Play another joke. Can you please do knock-knock joke? Right? It just goes on and on. To the outright unexpected. And boys, can you explain this to me? Why do you guys ask, how big is the sun in meters? And then say, how long is the sun in centimeters? Karen, can you explain that? Stand up here. Why do you ask that? Come here. Stand up. Stand up. Here. Tell everybody, why do you ask that? Go ahead.
Because it is really funny.
What happens?
It says like a million numbers.
All right. So how do you ask the question? Alexa,
how many centimeters are in the sun?
Okay. How many centimeters are in the sun? It sort of makes sense now. Some of these do. How do I get ketchup out of my shirt? How do you say kind of go to kind of bad in Spanish? How many lemons can you throw to time? How big is the sun in inches? What is the distance from the earth to the sun in centimeters? What's a dog? How much does the earth weigh in ounces? What's the distance to the sun in centimeters? How much lava is there in the earth? How hot is the sun? And this is my favorite in this category. Can you make a cake, please? Can I send you down, honey? Thank you. All right, here, you can ride on my shoulders. Here, you can better here. Come on up here. And of course, with any technology, there's the inevitable problems. And you see Amazon Echo capturing some of the family drama that she's caused. You think that you said the cake question? I bet you did. So we see somebody said you're the worst. This was probably me. No, I'm your father. Stop. Sit down and eat, right? You do not override our instructions, right? So this
Sit down and eat with mom.
Sit down and eat with mom. Right? And our kids are growing up with this technology, and what does it mean to always be able to have this AI participating in our lives? And that led me to a category I'll just tag out as the surreal. Is the war? Are you always listening? Can you scream for me? What is the loneliest number? Can you talk? How many days have you been alive? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you awake? You are dead. How long do you sleep? Can you die? Tell the kids good night. How many days have you survived? When were you made? And it's interesting to see that anthropomorphization, I did not say that word right, but I think you all know what I mean, to the technology, where the children, as young children, not fully intellectually developed, are building relationships with a piece of hardware and technology. And when the Google comes into my house, I'm somewhat interested to see how that conversation evolves. But looking back or looking forward, ultimately, we just don't know. We're sort of stuck in this position today where we don't know what's going to happen. None of us. And if we think about, what's the real goal here, I'll go back to. Oh, you know what, boys? We missed this part, Kieran, where you were going to tell your joke. Do you want to tell your joke? All right, come on up here. So on this joke phrase, I was supposed to pass the mic to Kieran here. So go ahead, Kieran. What's your joke?
Knock, knock. Boo. Don't cry, it's just the mailman or something.
All right, you got another one?
Yeah.
All right, what's the next one?
Why'd the cow cross the road?
Why?
To get to the movies. Dad, I have one more.
You one more? All right, one more joke.
Why'd the bike fall?
Why?
Because he was too tired.
That was awesome, Kieran. Thank you very much. Okay, so Kieran, you're passionate about jokes. What else are you passionate about? Do you have any other passions you'd like?
Playing the violin.
What else? Do you like building anything?
Yes.
What do you like building?
Legos.
Legos? And train tracks?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kieran. I appreciate that. Emma, what about you? Do you want to tell anybody what you're passionate about? Do you want to? Do you want to tell me and I'll tell them? No? Do you want to tell me over here? Come here. Pokemon and violin. And I think he's gonna play us out at the end of the day with something that he wants to share with you guys. So when I think about, what's the goal here, I go back to some of the formative experiences that I've had in entrepreneurship, and I think about startups in particular, where I've spent the last three jobs, 15 years of my life in startups. And you think about all the reasons that people get into startups and why they fail. People get in because they think they've got this disruptive idea. They get in because they love the technology. They like to build things. They want to make a lot of money, the glory. But none of those things ever really seem to work out because a lot of times things are terrible. Even when you're passionate about it, it sucks. Can be the worst thing ever. And Steve Jobs does all these talks where he frequently spoke about passion, and he talked about how without passion, any rational person would give up, and you wouldn't stick with anything that really mattered, any hard problem that mattered. And one of the ones that I've really dived in on is security. And I've spent a lot of time, about the last 15 years, almost exclusively working in security and thinking about defense in particular, because defense is really hard. No offense to our red team, I love what you guys do. But defense is even harder than that. And this sort of modern security paradigm essentially is that you accept that the goal is not prevention. It's to minimize the risk of loss due to intrusion. And the sort of tangential understanding there is that compromise is inevitable. And that's another way of saying that failure is inevitable, right? That part of your process needs to understand that a lot of the things you try aren't going to work. And a lot of times it's how quickly you respond to that. And taking that idea and applying it to my own life, personally, failure is inevitable. And I'll share a quick story here that leads to a very happy ending. 2 startups ago, I was working my ass off. I was flying all around the world. I can tell you, I'm sorry, I have the language there. I can tell you that in 2 years, I flew a little over 500,000 miles. I visited 100 or more cities. I was away from my family nonstop, putting in 110%. And for a variety of reasons, the startup didn't work out, and I ended up being fired. at the worst point, the day I was supposed to get paid nearly $60,000, which I needed to feed my kids who are right here with you guys. And it was a very devastating experience. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of supportive friends, an amazing wife. Actually, my first call was to Brett Thorson, if you guys know Thor. He was in the room, and I was still flabbergasted. I was like, I still cannot believe that this just happened. And over the next few days, we were reeling. My wife and I talked about it. And we decided to take another bite at the apple and to have just accepted that this was failing fast. So 7 days later, I did another startup, Critical Stack, which was a pretty small team with pretty huge results. Today we have over 6,000 customers, and we've built this platform around Kubernetes that lets you containerize and scale pretty much anything. And I talked about that happy ending. We went from fired, fearing that we were going to not be able to pay our mortgage, to less than 18 months later being acquired by Capital One Bank. And it wasn't the desire to be rich that got me through those months. It was having a supportive community. It was being really passionate and believing in what I was doing. And it was accepting that it is okay to fail, even if it's embarrassing, even if it feels humiliating, because that's what it felt like. So when I think about what we're doing today, I don't really think that we're here to talk about vocational work for our kids. We're not here to talk about what jobs we can shoehorn them into, because everybody knows tech's going to stay hot until it's not. But I was even trying to think about what kind of jobs would we be preparing them for that don't exist. And thinking about the AI, I was thinking that maybe there'll be an AI therapist, right? A job that your job is to help diagnose weird emotional behaviors in AI, or a drone manager, or a human Android integration specialist. But I think that that's totally the wrong idea, because the goal is not to find jobs for my kids. It's to help them try a lot of stuff and find out what they're passionate about, and then figure out how they can do that the most. Because that seems to be the real trick to success and enjoying yourself and getting to go to work every day and still being able to say, which I do, I can't believe I get paid to do this. It's unbelievable that somebody gives me money to come in and do what I get to do, right? So how do we get there? I don't think child labor, where we started, is necessarily the right way to get there. But I do think that together in this room, this is the best example that I can think of. Because it comes down to community, it comes down to family, and it comes down to service. And that seems to be the real path to success. So what my strategy is for my family, and what we're doing out here today, is after the keynote, you'll find us over hustling, volunteering, community service style in the BSides CryptCon with some Arduino kits, some little robotics kits, and you can come over and build robots with us. And every 30 minutes, we're going to run a quick little Android starter a workshop. And this is the first time we've ever done it. And you know what? It might be a total failure, but that's okay. Thank you guys very much. And Eamon is going to play us. Eamon is going to play us out. Eamon, what are you going to play? So he's going to play a song called Andantino. So this is one of the things that Eamon is really passionate about that he wanted to share. Thank you guys very much. We'll see you guys over at BSides CryptCon, Kids CryptCon.